Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control now. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Johnny's got a problem, he's out of control. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Got static on the brain, out of control now. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Got static on the brain.
Side 1 is called D for D. Boone, who drew the medium straw. Welcome to Jughead's Basement. This podcast will be this album. This album is Double Nickels on the Dime, a double record released in 1984 by SST band The Minutemen. The record contains 45 songs. This song is Anxious Mofo, sung by D. Boone, the letter D, then Boone, on guitar and vocals, Mike Watt on bass, and George Hurley on drums. A three-piece that grew up together in San Pedro, California. Two geeky outcasts and a popular surfer boy changed the texture of the American punk scene that was just beginning to make waves. The album version of Double Nickels on the Dime slightly veered from the later CD release. It was agreed amongst my writers and performers that we stick to the original release. That being said, there are 3 songs that were removed: Mr. Robot's Holy Orders, Little Man with a Gun in His Hand, and Ain't Talking About Love. Those 3 songs in this podcast are not the versions that appear on the vinyl. I couldn't find them in time. This is not an analysis, but a personal take on a highly influential record. A full analysis has already been published in book form in a series called 33 1/3. How we feel this radio show about this record should affect one is as follows. To hear the Minutemen is to see yourself, and to hear us in relation to the Minutemen is to once again see yourself in hearing us and in the Minutemen. That is my hope, and I hope it is yours. And now, in order that the tracks take place on the album, but in no particular order of performers, pieces by Eric T. Roth, Emma Casey, Bob Stockfish, Steve Walker, Mike Yannich, Douglas O'Rourke, and myself, with interviews of Minutemen bassist Mike Watt and Double Nickels on the Dime photographer and lifelong friend of the band, Dirk Vandenberg.
He asked, halfway into the second song. It's good, I said. Different than I expected. This was a year and a half ago, and I was listening to Double Nickels on the Dime for the first time. It was one of those albums that I knew I should have listened to in high school when my friends and I were getting into those seminal punk bands we read about in Our Band Could Be Your Life, a book even named for a Minutemen lyric.
Our band could be your life.
But no, Minutemen came to me in college, burned onto a CD for me and from the boy I had a crush on, no less. And one evening we sat in my bedroom, cross-legged next to my boombox, and listened to the album. Which was exciting. The whole situation. And the music really didn't sound anything like I expected it to. Frustration and anger were taking on different sounds and melodies than I'd heard before, and this second song, Theater is the Life of You, was funky. Like dance music at the after party of a protest. And song after song, the album kept changing, which is exciting.
Viet Nam. This is a song about war and numbers. Let's say I got a number. That number is 50,000. I can tell you that 50,000 refers roughly to the number of U.S. casualties by the end of the Vietnam War. 500,000 likely means that at its peak in 1969, there were approximately that many troops in active duty in the conflict taking place in French Indochina. That's 10% for those of you keeping score. The war was fought, like most wars, largely by the working class. In August of 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution is approved by Congress. In 1965, Operation Rolling Thunder would begin a continuous 3-year bombing raid, and the first Marines would land in Da Nang. 10 long years later, the last Americans evacuate as Saigon falls to the Communists, but the origin of the war can be traced back 30 years, to 1945, when Ho Chi Minh created a provisional government, when British forces landed to return power to the French, when the first American died after being mistaken for a Frenchman. In 1954, President Eisenhower outlined his domino theory after a French garrison was defeated by the Vietnamese. You have a row of dominoes set up. You knock over the first one, and what will happen to the last one is the certainty that it will go over very quickly. But 10 long years, or 30, or 40, or 50, not one domino shall fall.
Cohesion. Double Nickels on the Dime was released 2 years before I was born, 15 years before I listened to it for the first time. It is a favorite album of many older men whom I looked up to as a child, then as a teen. By the time I gave it my full attention, these men had started careers, had started families, had started successful artistic endeavors. I got it for Christmas. I was in 8th grade. My Uncle Patrick hurried me into my bedroom after my family exchanged gifts, and he put on the CD. I've never actually seen the double vinyl. He waited excitedly, knowing I loved punk music, knowing I loved him, and my immediate reaction was unimpressed. But I trusted Uncle Patrick. He had grown up in Michigan, in love with the Detroit music scene. He had stories about driving to see The Clash play the entirety of London Calling and talking his way into the club. He booked early Chicago all-ages shows and helped manage one of Chicago's earliest hardcore bands, Articles of Faith, producing their first album. He knew punk rock. Me, I didn't really. My punk vocabulary included a myriad of contemporary pop-punk bands, Rancid, NoFX, Screeching Weasel, but got hazy farther and farther back in time. This album didn't sound like the punk rock I knew, so there must have been something hidden inside. Something deeper. Something that made it my favorite album of all time forever.
I've gotten into a lot of arguments with friends about lyrics in rock. I know a lot of people who sort of think, well, they don't mean anything or they don't matter or it's not important. What's important is the music and how well somebody plays a guitar. But I've always argued that wasn't true, and some of my favorite artists are people like Stephen Malkmus or Elvis Costello. This begs the question where rock lyrics fall, maybe somewhere between poetry and a spoken word piece. And of course, within rock, there's all kinds of lyrics, a lot of things that are just oblique. There's things that are ironic, like on this album, Maybe Partying Will Help, or number one hit song. And then there are things that are straightforward. So some straightforward things are brutally honest, and others are things that get played on the radio. When I listen to I Make Certain My Head Is Connected to My Body, I think perhaps that lies somewhere between the oblique and the brutally honest.
I make certain that my head is connected to my body.
Track 6, Hit Song.
Everyone has a friend or friends who expose them to things they wouldn't otherwise know. As far as music goes, my friends Dave and Steve were the ones. In high school and college, I would routinely come home from their houses with 20 or 30 albums to listen to and to tape. It wasn't called pirating then, it was just, you just made tapes. Big deal. I can't even begin to count the days and nights I'd sit in Dave's apartment in college, in the oh-so-very far-from-punk town of Oxford, Ohio, listening to the entire catalog of labels like Ralph Records, Alternative Tentacles, and SST. But hearing music in the car was a different story. Jordan Burns, and he shall forever be called by his full name, had what I can only call a magic car stereo. Basic factory install, he would inform me decades later, but I will never forget the first time I heard Double Nickels, and the Minutemen for that matter. It was on a cassette, either a TDK or a Maxell, because really, who used anything else? And the sounds of it filling that car were unlike any other musical experience I have ever had or have had since. The Minutemen always sound great to me, but never like they did in that moment in Jordan Burns' car.
In 1989, on Screeching Weasel's Malibu tour, 4 of us crammed into Ben's Chevy with drums, guitars, merch, 5 cases of vinyl records, and 2 double cassette tapes to listen to for pleasure. The Ramones' double live record called It's Alive, and the Minutemen's Double Nickels on the Dime. We were an unknown band paving our own basement and VFW tour across the country from Chicago to California and back again. 10,000 miles in less than 4 weeks. We were jamming Econo without an Econo line. Between creating long lists of euphemisms for breasts like silver dollar nipples and singing harmonic versions of 1,000 bottles of beer on the wall, we would listen to the endless, catchy, indistinguishable rhythms of the Ramones, and occasionally, as we rotated from driver to navigator to sleeping in the back seat with knees pressed against instrument cases and backpacks, one of us, usually Ben or myself, would choose to put on Double Nickels on the Dime. It was the first time I had heard it, and as a road record, it was hypnotizing. By the end of the tour, I never wanted to hear the Ramones record again, but for some reason, Double Nickels remains in my collection, moving from cassette tape to vinyl to CD to iTunes download to Pirate Bay torrent. It reminds me of the days of living on peanut butter sandwiches spread with a Papermate pen, playing through a hand-constructed amp that made my guitar sound like crinkling paper, pouring our musical hearts out to audiences of 15 or less people in Detroit, New York, Phoenix, Portland, etc., 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 etc. I have no idea what this song is about. Supposedly, neither does Mike Watt, who played bass. And, supposedly, George Hurley on drums, who wrote the song. George told Boone and Watt that he had forgot what he was writing about the moment his pen was done scribbling words on paper. Watt says no matter what, the song was about us touring and playing, about us being on stage for the audience. And for me, that is a fine answer. I can relate to that, and etc.
One dark but not stormy night last winter, I was driving home from an Occupy Chicago event I was involved in, with Double Nickels on the car stereo. I was playing through the quieter songs, those songs on the album that wind around with delicate guitar parts.
The word war will set off the keg. My words are war. Should a word have 2 meanings? The fuck for? Should words serve the truth?
And on repeat, that was the soundtrack as I toured alone, under familiar street lamps, on familiar streets, in my borrowed silver minivan. But there's nothing delicate about this or any of these songs, and I suppose that's why they're comforting. They're full of words. I stand for language, I speak for truth, I shout for history, I am a cesspool. For me, this is the anxiety of our personal and political battles played out within, around, and in between sentences, when I can't even read what my mind tells me is true, and I am lured by lights, by sound, by who's yelling louder, sharper, bigger, better, faster. I settle into the driver's seat and stop trying to sort through the mess. It's there, so I absorb it, just loosen my white-knuckled grip and take it all in.
I stand for language. I speak for truth.
I shout for history.
I am a cesspool
For all the shit.
to run down in.
Ask New Wave, that temptress, what she can do for me, and what dive motel on Lincoln Avenue I might find truth holed up in. Go there instead and see truth sitting in bed, flipping through the cable news channels that came with the room. I'd crawl under the sheets with her and etch my name in the headboard before I leave. We were familiar. We'd had words.
Don't Look Now. Part of growing up punk and smart and critical is talking shit about everything. The smarter you were, the more shit you could talk about it. Even the things that you loved. Just argue and argue and argue. That's all my friends and I would do. Personally, I hated this song. Don't Look Now. This was my favorite album in the world, and whenever this song came on, I was like, why the fuck do they have a live track, 9 songs into a 40-plus song album? I pressed it next on my Discman. Oh, and John wanted me to say this. Mike Watt started wearing flannel because he wanted to appeal to Boone's obsession with the band Creedence Clearwater, a 60s band clad completely in jeans and flannel plaid button-down shirts.
Take the lead and roll it to a tree.
Don't look now, it ain't you or me.
Let the products sell themselves. Fuck advertising, commercial psychology, psychological methods to sell should be destroyed. Because of their own blind involvement in their own conditioned minds. Unit bonded together. Morals, ideas, awareness, progress. Let yourself be heard.
This is obviously the catchiest song on the album, and you can't help but wonder if D. Boon had only thought to make the chorus the name of the song. I mean, he didn't seem to do that much for some reason, but if he had just sang a few times, shit from an old notebook, shit from an old notebook, it might have made the song more memorable, and that may have really improved the sales of the album, which are pretty good for an indie album, but I really thought that might have made the song that much more effective, and I just wanted to say that.
Nature Without Man.
The Pied Piper, the heart and mind. The Pied Piper, the heart and mind. Nature without man, nature without man, nature without man, nature without man.
It is well known that the Pied Piper was an asshole. But was he really? Here's a guy with a unique talent. He can play his pipe and make children or rats follow him. Now, there's not a lot you can do with that talent. I imagine him playing the pipe one day, minding his own, when all of a sudden he looks around and he's got like 25 rats and 16 kids behind him. You know, in certain cities, wherever you stand, you are 10 feet from a rat. You just don't know it. They're all underground or in gutters or in the walls. It creeps me out, but it might be apocryphal. Anyway, so this guy has all these rats, and he starts walking and walking, and eventually he gets to a body of water, and all the rats fall in and drown. By the way, this is false. Rats can swim like crazy. So now he has a marketable skill set. He goes to the mayor or the jarl or whatever and says, hey, listen, I've been noticing you've been having a little problem with the vermin. I can take care of that for you at a reasonable price. So the mayor's like, cool, payment upon deratting. So the Pied Piper plays his flute, I imagine something along the lines of Aqualung, and all the rats go into the water and drown. But then the mayor is all, yeah, well, maybe that wasn't you. Maybe those rats killed themselves like lemmings. Sorry, no dice. Go play jazz somewhere. Which is, a really dick thing to do. So he goes, he does the same thing with kids. Leads them away with his flute song. Maybe something like, I come from the land down under by Men at Work. But now there's 2 different versions of this story. One is that all the kids, except for 3 handicapped ones, drowned. The other is that he took them to some beautiful mountain. Now, Wikipedia is kind of vague on this, so I'd like to think it's the latter. And all the kids lived happily ever after, or he returned them after the mayor ponied up. Look, the lesson here is that you don't mess with a flute player with magical fucking powers, and you pay for services rendered. I have no idea what this song is about, but then I also have a hard time understanding Ulysses.
One reporter's opinion.
Yeah, it's a song I wrote. A lot of these songs I wrote in first person, but the bass lines were too hard, so D. Boon ended up having to sing them. Not D. Boon's opinion of me, it's my own observations of myself, and have my friend sing about it. The title comes from this reporter. What was his name? He was some guy on SoCal local news, and he'd have part of the show where it'd be one reporter's opinion, and he'd let you know what was on his mind. But I immortalized him a little bit. I also just read Ulysses for the first time, so that had a big bearing on all the tunes I wrote on that album.
In case you don't know, Watt is referring to the novel called Ulysses by James Joyce, which was written between March 1918 and December of 1920. It chronicles the passage of a character named Leopold Bloom, which oddly sounds a lot like D. Boon, during one ordinary day on the 16th of June, 1904. Yeah, there's a quote that Fourier had said that you had said about Ulysses got skeletal.
So there's different episodes in the story. Actually, the story's all about one day in Dublin. But the different episodes have different writing techniques. And there's one towards the end, main protagonist, Mr. Bloom. He's, one of his last spiels is kind of in a skeletal form. Sometimes they're newspaper headlines, sometimes it's a play, sometimes it's an opera. The book uses all kinds of styles. I think that's where I got the skeletal, because I'm not really I was skinnier in those days, but I wasn't really talking about it seems out of place because D. Boon, it sounds like D. Boon is singing it at me, just singing it for me. I asked him to.
Can you remember how it felt to have someone else say the words that you had wrote about yourself?
It was weirder with Firehose. Yeah, I didn't know Edward that well. Not for D. Boon. D. Boon was a big reason why I was in music, period. So he was very brave and very straight up and honest about things.
Pain is the toughest riddle. He's charged. He's a dartboard. His sex is disease. He's a stop sign. He's charged. He's a dartboard. His sex is disease. He's a stop sign.
Side 2 is called Mike, for Mike Watt, who drew The Smallest Straw. Political song for Michael Jackson to sing.
Mike Jackson to sing was my first pick. I got, the way we had so many fucking songs, we didn't know how to put them in an order, so I came up with this idea where we drew straws. Actually, Georgie got the first pick, and then I think I got third. D. Boon got second pick. He picked Anxious Mofo, and I came around third, and I picked Mike Jackson. We thought, we did it that way. All the good songs would be at the, because the vinyl, the needle would go on the outside. So the ones hugging the label would be the worst ones. And then the ones nobody picked would go on the foreside.
Then Georgie didn't pick all his songs. Then you would go in like a rotation?
Georgie picked his fucking solo song. I mean, one of the jokes on the album, besides the title on Sammy Hagar, Can't Drive 55, is we were trying to be like Uma Guma and everybody had a solo song.
Uma Guma is a live album by the band Pink Floyd. It was released on 25th of October, 1969. It's a double album containing part of their normal set list of the time, while the second half contains solo compositions by each member of the band.
This monitor's a right with petition. I have this philosophy. Is your life worth a painting? Is this girl versus boy with different symbols? Being bored is power. Not detect this big sin. Your risk change me hostage. Me, I'm fighting with my head. I'm not ambiguous. I must look like a dork.
So Georgie had this solo song where he's whistling and playing oil cans. He picked that one first.
Yeah, I know.
Sure. And D. Boon, he picked his because he liked it. I think Georgie picked it because it was his. My first pick was my song, but I just thought it was really awkward and trippy the way D. Boon sang it. You could tell, because you see, we had to write a whole bunch of songs. We had an album done in November, and then the Huskers came the next month to record Zen Arcade, and we thought, wow, we should try do a double album too, so we had to write all these songs quick. And this is one of them. It's actually a song I sent to Mike Jackson's manager, because I thought if Mike Jackson sang a Minutemen song, then people would understand what the Minutemen were trying to get across.
All right. Me naked with textbook poems about against the Nazis, the weird kind of sex symbol. In speeches that are big dance thumbs. If we heard mortar shells, we cuss more in our songs and cut down the guitar solos.
I didn't know what he thought would think of him or whatever, but I thought if he did it, this would be a way people could hear about us on another kind of level. But, no, I didn't have big expectations. And, turned out to be the case. They never wrote back. They never even said no or anything.
I think it was better that you guys covered your own song.
No, we were going to do it anyway, but I wrote it for him to sing.
So dig this big crux. Organizing the Boy Scouts for murderous wrong. 10 years beyond the big sweat point. Man, it was still there ever without you. Coming back around, look, we're coming together for just a second. A peek, a guess. At the wholeness, it's way too big. At the wholeness, it's way too big. I'm able to waste my energy to notice life being so beautiful. Maybe parting will help.
So in 82 or 83, my sister went off to college and I was stuck in Central Texas by myself as far as musical taste was concerned. And she had a college radio show, and I remember in 1984 when she sent me a cassette of her show, and it had the lights, the sound, the rhythm, and the noise by Flipper, and Frank's Wild Years by Tom Waits, who I'd never heard before, and Sharky's Night by Laurie Anderson, with William S. Burroughs on it. And this song, Maybe Parting Will Help. So the first time I ever heard a Minuteman song, it was this song.
Sun's going down like a big bald head, disappearing behind the boulevard. It's Sharky's night. Yeah, it's Sharky's night tonight.
Number 7 on the jump list. Playing stooge, eating the shit. Toadies.
This song is a litany of strange insults. Number 7 on the chump list. Who are the other 6? I mean, 7 is pretty far down the list. Playing stooge is weird because it makes one think of the Three Stooges, or Iggy Pop and the Stooges, both of whom I have to think the Minutemen admire. But then they have them both eating shit and using it as a reason for kicking shit. Are they stooges or toadies?
Toadies.
Webster defines a toady as a person who behaves obsequiously to someone important. In other words, an ass kisser. So while they kiss ass, they eat some of the shit, and then they kick the other shit. But then towards the end of the song, they take a perspective of the insults themselves. We are cuss words, nearly illiterate, dedicated to fighting toadies. So maybe this song is a call to arms, or words in a way. If you see some ass kisser, throw some half-literate curses at them, because maybe that's all they deserve.
We are cuss words, nearly illiterate, dedicated to fighting toadies.
Note, Mike Watt wrote this song based on the memoirs of Dmitri Shostakovich, which I've never read. But apparently, he was a toady to Stalin. Maybe you should read it, you fucking shit-kicking ass-face fucknuts.
There have been several times in the last 8 or so years that I stood in a record store weighing used copies of Double Nickels in my hands, reading the name Minutemen and the title, and then, unable to understand the cover or any of the intrigue the photo might have, I'd file it back away and hunt down other bands I had a stronger need to be familiar with. One friend said he came upon the album through the 2-second sample of History Lesson Part 2 at the beginning of Sublime Song. And other friends just digested it as a part of musical history, discovered and paired it up with Zen Arcade, food for our insatiable musical appetites, the coolest kids in school, unbeknownst to our peers, of course, listening to older punk rock. That was still weird, still fringed, still fragmented, and that never changes. And now, like any good older sibling, I have since passed it on to my little brother. He loves this album, says it's his favorite. So it's all spider webs and arrows. Expand and contract. Advance and retreat. Will lose their meaning. Tapes and CDs left in the wake of our friendships.
Because of Thundercloud, my head's a tape recorder.
And like that cough at the end of the song, a thunderclap, bringing it all to a close and retreating back to somewhere else, to turn up at a different time for a new person.
A richer understanding of what's already understood. No meanings from the here and now.
Well, here we have a song called The Big Voice, and having already been equally jaw-dropped and confused by a lot of the previous songs on this punk record, I had never really heard song structure quite like this before. It starts with a verse that is a punk shuffle almost, with like talking, singing, and then it goes into this weird progressive rock, soulful guitar solo, which there's not many guitar solos in punk records anyway. And then it comes back into the verse, and D. Boon exclaims that he's fucking overwhelmed, and I kind of understand what he means in a good way, in a way that says that this record is something I've been looking for a long time, and I can't believe that I've actually found it.
In the tomb of Enoch, in the Queen's chamber, guarding the holy Cupid.
So I realized because I'm into math, I was given God Bows to Math as a song, even though it really doesn't have anything to do with math. And so the main thing that occurred to me here was, as I said before, my sister turned me on to the Minutemen, and then she made friends with Bob. And Bob introduced me to Diana, who introduced me to John Pearson, who's making this podcast. And as a high school teacher, I met a freshman whose favorite album in 2003 was Double Nickels on the Dime. And so I became friends with that student, who became friends with John, who is now also appearing on this podcast, and his name is Eric Roth. And this illustrates the mathematical idea of transitivity, which is a property of equivalence relations. And when it comes to double nickels on the dime, there also seems to be a transitive property.
Corona. The problem with being a teenager about 20 years after this album dropped is this sound. For the older folk on this podcast, there might be no controversy, but when I was in 8th grade, Jackass first aired on MTV, and their theme song was Corona. When I played this album for other people, I'd get a mix of reactions until, oh, that's the Jackass theme. I had to fight Bob, who's going to talk about the next track for this song. This album was not made for my generation. There's an audible disconnect. I've always been removed from the immediate context of the early 80s when these songs were recorded. It's a generational disconnect I think about every time someone shoots up a school or a movie theater. I think of these adult Americans who lived part of their adulthood before an endless war, before Columbine, before 9/11. The injustice of our greed, the practice we inherit. I wish my peers could have listened to the lyrics when they were finished watching Jackass. They're brilliant, efficient, and uncomfortably ambivalent. The recordings of a quick thought one drink in. The people will survive in their environment, the dirt, scarcity, and the emptiness of our South. The injustice of our greed, the practice we inherit, the dirt, scarcity, and the emptiness of our South. There on the beach, I can see it in her eyes. I only had a Corona, 5 cents per bottle.
Track 8, The Glory of Man.
Starting with the affirmation of man, I work my way backwards using cynicism. The space measurer.
My friend Tony is a true believer in hard rock and punk. We both grew up outside of Cleveland, he being from a blue-collar west side suburb, me from a fussy east side enclave. Tony wore his heart on his sleeve when it came to music. As a for instance, when I met him in 1998, he was still having a hard time accepting Rob Halford's admission of being gay. I didn't see that coming, he said earnestly, shaking his head. Anyway, whenever I'd ask him about a band that I liked or had liked, he, with his decidedly non-punk-looking cherubic baby face and never-ending smile, would respond with something like fucking posers or pussies. For some reason, I never queried him on the Minutemen, figuring they were just too out there for his tastes. I didn't think about that much, and over the years didn't see Tony all that much either. So when I went to see We Jamicano, I cried, sitting next to my friend Doug, who I knew was also crying. And when the film ended and I stood, wiping my eyes and turning to leave, there, 2 rows back, red-eyed and tear-stained, was that angelic face of Tony. The Minutemen, it turns out, weren't just worthy of his admiration, but their absence could bring him to tears. I can never shake that image, nor do I want to, whenever I listen to this album. My favorite band's best album, good enough for Tony.
I think it's actually your solo on your side is Take 5D.
Yeah. Well, that's just... Yeah, Georgie had You Need the Glory. D. Boone did one called Cohesion. I think he just played acoustic guitar. And then I did this one where I played some acoustic guitar and had some friends play the guitar and read this landlady's note. I was trying to be, more real. And also, to me, it was absurd, the idea of me making a solo song. At that time, I thought all my music should be with D. Boone. So for me to say Take 5D is like a ridiculous thing for me, ridiculous circumstance I felt of myself. And I'm kind of making fun of myself for writing too spacey words and to try to make music without D. Boone.
Did you feel when he was saying you're being too spacey to write something more real that that's sort of a tongue-in-cheek way of Were you aware of what he was saying and what you ended up doing?
This landlady was letting my friend Dirk, in fact, the guy who took the photograph of the cover, letting him know that every time he used the shower, it was leaking and coming down on his downstairs neighbor ceiling. So, I mean, that was a real communication. The lady, couldn't waste energy on analogies and metaphors and stupid shit like this. And so I thought, well, this is not being spacey. This is the opposite of spacey. That's the way I looked at it. I wasn't really trying to be mean to D. Boon or make him look silly. I was really trying to make something real. I was making fun of myself with the stupid guitar shit, terrible rhythm guitar I was playing, trying to make music without D. Boon. I didn't think I was very good at it.
Does it matter to you how an audience perceives those lyrics? Does it matter to you that they know the context?
The U.S. punk scene was very small when we started, and most people hated it. So you had to just get kind of a thick skin and not care about what other people thought. It wasn't like we were above or beyond anybody, but we just couldn't worry about that because, you'd have no confidence at all. Most people, fuck you, Devo, and this kind of shit, It was a terrible kind of thing. So you, in a way, as far as you looking for encouragement or anything, but on the other hand, it was kind of a positive thing because you learned not to care and you kept your vision pretty uncompromised. My Heart in the Real World, that one was kind of like a little tribute to Wire in a way, on purpose.
So my soul collapsed into a big guilt wad. Some big thunder law forces me to eat shit. And if I was a word, could my letters number 100? Or likely caution guttural one syllable Anglo-Saxon.
Is that why you think that one comes off more melodic than a lot of the other ones that you've written?
I did it on purpose. The words are all about the Ulysses thing and experience of reading that book. And, I start with the title, and then I make music around it, and then I put in the lyrics. And so when I made the title, I was thinking if I wanted to make a tribute to Wire. There's a song called Fragile.
Wire is a British punk band that formed in London in October of 1976. The album that Mike is referring to is called Pink Flag, which was Wire's debut record.
And he goes, find me a nail, let me hang my heart. So my heart in the real world. So I was trying to make a tribute to them. The real world. The Wire, also another England band called Pop Group, both helped us try to find a way to find our own voice. Not by copying them so much, but just to be brave to try different things.
Caused you to start reading Ulysses on the road?
Well, I actually started it here in Pedro, and then tour came. It was with Black Flag. I had already started reading it at home. I think I just turned 25. I remember, too, a trip was when we stayed in D.C. It was at Hank's Ma's pad, and she had a concordance, Ulysses on the Liffey. And that was a trip to read a concordance. It was almost like a helper book for the fucking Bible. I remember reading that whole thing in the one day we were there. Wow, a book about a book. But, like I said, I was thinking out loud, so this is the time period we're in. And I didn't have a conference with D. Boon on this, He knew I was reading it. He didn't care about what I used to put in songs. He did wish I could write a little clearer.
I'm a victim of fact, let's say I loved a girl, but the world was wrong and I was forced to march in line. Finally I felt like handcuffs, but she's disregard my pronouns. I am defeated, I'm a cool damn clay.
Track 11, History Lesson, Part 2. End of Vinyl Album 1.
I'd call it their most punk song simply because it's not like a punk song that you would expect. It's not like anything else on the album or in their catalog or on the whole SSD label for that matter. Poignant, sentimental, simple and beautiful, and it's just utterly devastating in its message of love of music and love of friendship and just the absolute life-changing power of music. It's a breathtaking end to record one. And yeah, your band changed my life.
Our band could be your life. Real names be proved. Me and Mike Watt, we played for years. Punk rock changed our lives. We learned punk rock in Hollywood. Drove up from Pedro. We were fucking corn dogs. We'd go drink and pogo. Mr. Narrator, this is Bob Dylan to me. My story could be his songs. I'm his soldier child. Our band of scientist rock. But I was E. Bloom, then Richard Hell, Joe Strummer, and John Doe. Me and Mike Watt playing the guitar.
Thank you for listening to Jughead's Basement. Make sure to check out the other shows on the TNH network right here at TuesdayNightHoot.com.